Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished professional from the world of media tech, films from Oregon, USA, Heather Frank. Heather, welcome to the show.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Heather is an art director, a motion, graphic, and Gen AI designer, and she's a rebellious Moonbeam. Heather is an award-winning visual artist and designer who's equally comfortable and successful in the worlds of fine art and business. Her films have been showcased at the Guggenheim Supernova Animation Festival, Meow Wolf, Nightlights Denver, and RES Fest. So, Heather, before we start talking about all your amazing accomplishments, tell me about your own journey and what took you to the world of visual art and design.
Wow, that's a good question. First, hello, thank you so much for having me here on your podcast. So what took me to this journey was originally I was a fine artist. I did a lot of painting and dance and choreography, and I was your typical starving artist. So I needed to make a living and support myself. At the time, I was living in Seattle, Washington, and I had a friend who was working at a company where they did fabric design. I realized I had a gift for design. So I put myself through design school, and then I moved slowly from graphic design into motion graphics. And then about 2 years ago, I started hopping on board with the AI craze. And now I also design in generative AI, just the cliff notes. That's kind of how it started.
Amazing. And, winning the Adobe Achievement Award and a silver IDA are
Yes.
significant achievements. Can you tell us a little more about these experiences and what they have meant to you?
Oh, wow. So when I was in design school, I went to a school called California College of Arts in San Francisco. It's a very rigorous design program.
Right.
And the first year I was there, I really struggled coming from fine art into design, which was so mathematical and precise. And I was sort of the underdog. That program requires you to go through a thesis, which means you have a concentrated section of study, and there were a lot of designers from the San Francisco community that participate.
Right.
So it was very high pressure, very intense. And towards the end of this thesis, I took that piece and I had applied to this call for art. And long story short, I ended up winning it. And Adobe featured my work, and it went around the world, and it was this amazing moment. Actually, I remember the moment it happened. I had applied, and then I went out to Napa, California, and was spending the day with some family. And when I came back, I had the message that I had won this amazing award. And it really changed how I felt about myself at that point, and what I could accomplish and what was possible. And it really helped, of course, with my career. As you can imagine. Awards, when you're first getting out of school, it just really helps people see you and notice you and get you started. So that was amazing. And the silver IDA came a few years later. That I got from a project that I worked with my creative director, Brent McCowan, for an animation I did while I worked for a company named Craftsy. And that was another just instinctual, I should apply, and then I ended up taking second place. So those were amazing. Those were just amazing.
I agree with you, and congratulations. So
Thank you.
my next question, Heather, is what are the unique challenges of working in motion design as compared to other forms of visual art?
So what makes motion design different than other forms of art or even graphic design is that you're dealing with a timeline and story, time-based media. So animation in general is very labor intensive. 1 second of animation takes an hour. So you can kind of get a sense if you have a 2 minute animation, that's a lot of time. And that's not even getting into revisions or changes or adding sound or editors and the whole process that is involved with animation. So it's very what's the word? It's very intense. I spend a lot of time not sleeping. Especially in the beginning, there were many,
Yeah.
many all-nighters. It's a very challenging, very technical field. The software is a lot more in depth. I also work in Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator and the whole Adobe suite. But for animation, I'm primarily in After Effects and Cinema 4D. And those programs are the most complex programs I've ever worked in.
Fascinating.
So technically it's challenging. Timelines are challenging. Budgets in the entertainment industry, time really is money. So you have to hit these deadlines, otherwise people's budgets are blown.
Very interesting.
So
And
there's no
a
wiggle
few
room.
minutes back, you also talked about how you're beginning to work with generative AI. How
Yes.
do you integrate emerging technologies like Gen AI into your work?
So Gen AI, I've worked in a lot of different types of Gen AI. I really love Midjourney in particular. That's one of my favorites. The reason is that I feel like it is the most nuanced and I'm really able to control it in a way I want. I use it all the time for storyboarding, which is also a process in animation. If you're not familiar, it's how you lay out the sequence of events that are going to occur. And then you can go back in and plan your transitions, which are the most complex part of an animation. So I use it for storyboarding. I use it also for initial comps for clients. So if a client wants to see 3 different directions, Gen AI allows me to create that very, very quickly for them. And then I also use it sort of like for stock imagery. It's not great yet for vector-based art or design. It's just not there. I think it will be. And I think the video component is coming online and we'll see more and more of that soon. But currently it's storyboarding and style frames and stock imagery.
Fascinating. And can you also talk about the importance of visual art in the tech industry and how it can enhance user experience? I know a visual is being used extensively in gaming.
Yes. Well, we're emotional creatures
Yeah.
and we respond to visual stimulation. We need it. We're hardwired for that. And it, not to be mean, but people can be more easily influenced with visual imagery, especially if you're trying to sell a product or create an experience for somebody. So just like storytelling is the same thing, we connect to storytelling and visuals. We need that emotional component to be able to connect to what somebody's selling or offering or wanting to engage us with. I don't think I'd want to live in a world that didn't have visual visual art. I think it's really, really important to us. And also just to our own well-being. And gaming too, it's the same, to come back to that. The gaming experience, how would you even do that without visuals?
Right.
It's like a movie, it's like watching film. It's like any kind of interactive visual experience. To be able to connect with more of your senses makes it a more engaging process and usually can attract more people.
Thank you. And what role does motion design play in your overall body of work?
Oh, that's a big part. I left graphic design. Well, I didn't leave it. It was less of an influence in my work, probably about 8 years ago, I think. And I went more into motion design as I began to specialize my career. So that's been my main offering for a while. I do a lot of work in the educational space with filmmakers. I create a lot of title sequences or explainer animations were really, really popular there for a while, or animated logos. So it's sort of the bread and butter of my business right now.
Okay. And Heather, how do you approach storytelling in your visual art and design work?
Wow, that's a good question. Usually I'll start with, well, two ways. If I'm working directly with an agency, they'll come with a creative brief and I'll connect with the creative director and we'll talk about the goals for their particular client. And then it's my job to interpret that information and lay out sort of a sequence of events for the story. In order to do that, I really need to have a lot of empathy and understanding for the client, the niche, what problem they're trying to solve in this. And I usually break it down beginning, middle, and end, and then sort of fill in on the sides. It's a lot easier to do it that way. And I like to work backwards. Um, I like to start with the ending and work to the beginning because usually the ending is really the special moment. And it's much easier to start at a place of sort of elevated emotion and information and then work backwards.
Well said. And for someone who spent such a long time in this area of work, my
Mhm.
question to you is, what are some trends that you are observing in visual art and design that you are most excited about now?
Of course, Gen AI.
Yeah.
That's a really big trend right now. There are a lot of artists who are combining what I would call hybridization of human work versus robotics, computers, augmented reality, virtual reality. I'm very excited about the combination of those two to see what we can come up with. Actually, had someone say to me the other day, they feel like generative AI and the whole AI revolution that's coming in could be like a golden age for
Yeah.
art and artists, and it will produce new forms. So
Mm,
I'm very excited and curious to see where that goes.
mm,
Um, I'm also really interested in the technology coming out where um, technology will be part of our life as wearables. So there's talk of contact lenses and glasses. I think, is it Ray-Ban? I think it's Ray-Ban that has some virtual reality glasses,
mm,
sunglasses right now. And then, of course, we have the Apple Watch. But I think all of these things will become smaller and more integrated.
mm.
Um, and I'm very, very excited and curious. There is a dark side to that, though,
Yeah.
because your privacy, if you are having wearables on your body, that means your information is going out to the advertising world and they're able to monitor and kind of harvest your
Mm,
information. And so we may see a future where we walk into our house and our wearables predict every single thing that we want to see, eat, based on what our body's doing, what we looked at last, what the temperature is. Um, and it's a little bit of a dystopian view, but I'm also very excited and curious what we'll do with that.
I
So sort of
agree.
a double-edged sword.
No, no, absolutely. In fact, there is also this amazing possibility that you're going into a brand A store. And as you walk into a brand A store, some of your wearables start saying, hey, listen, you got a better deal in brand B store. And
Oh my gosh.
but that's going to come, I'm sure. Our privacy has all been invaded in any case completely.
Yes.
But my next question to you, Heather, is how do you ensure your work remains impactful and
Mhm.
resonates with a very wide audience, which are culturally different, geographically different? That is a question that I've often wondered.
The way that I do it, usually, first of all, when I'm working for somebody, there's a very specific niche that I'm addressing.
Hmm.
I can't address too much at once, otherwise it won't be relevant.
Yeah.
So I have to sort of like, let's say it's a certain demographic or a certain age and a certain culture. I tend to separate out those projects and those niches.
Hmm.
Um, and then I do a lot of research into what's important, the best way to engage. In general, most people are human,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
and empathy is just a huge part of that,
Yeah.
part of that, not part of
Hmm.
that. But I also feel like the research and understanding cultural references and how we're different and how we're the same, and then drawing the parallels and finding the places where there's overlap. And then I tend to focus on those areas, because as much as we're the same, your my culture, for example, is really, really very different.
Correct.
And there are things that could be offensive in your culture, offensive in my culture. So just understanding and being respectful of the differences too. So it's a lot of research, and a lot of concept development.
Interesting. Just moving away to another point is, you were part of the Supernova Animation Festival.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about your experience there and what makes this festival so unique.
So Supernova is an animation festival out of Denver, Colorado, and it was developed, I think it was about 8 years ago now, by my friend Ivar Zeal. And it's an outdoor animation festival. So what they did is they took over all the billboards in the city and they put animations from different artists on there. And it's for 2 weeks, every block, because there are a lot of billboards, was just filled with animation. And it was really an amazing opportunity for artists to be seen, but also to culturally engage instead of having just empty billboards. So it's sort of a way to connect the community with each other. And during COVID, that festival was so important because everybody wanted to connect but couldn't. So they were outside. So the festival's outside. So then they were projecting onto buildings. They were doing a lot of projected animation onto different, what would you call that? Electronic feeds on buildings. So they are very innovative and interesting tech-forward animation festival. I was really honored that they decided to include my work, and I got to be on the Denver clock tower right downtown with a giant animation during COVID, and there were a lot of riots happening. So I had this opportunity to have a voice and to say something, and I really took advantage of that.
How amazing. How amazing. My next question for you is, what role does feedback play in your creative process? And how do you handle criticism?
Oh, that is a good question. So I don't think there's any part of my work that I don't get feedback with. And I don't consider feedback criticism. I just consider it information. I try and keep my emotions out of it. Not always easy, but it's important because if I really listen to what somebody's saying, and even if they're not being so great with the feedback, there's still information there for me that's important for me to hear, especially when working with a client. I want to make sure that I'm understanding what this person wants from me and how I feel like we can better understand each other.
Right.
So it's because I can't always see myself as well. I feel like the feedback helps me understand my own communication style and how I can adjust and become stronger, more powerful in the way that I understand and listen to people. And listening is an extremely important part of feedback. I think I've watched people when they first start their careers, sometimes they can be a little bit, what's the word? A little defensive, which is understandable. But eventually, I think if you understand that the feedback is there for you to grow and to get better, and to learn how to communicate more effectively, it's a fantastic tool. So I think it's if you're not getting feedback in your work probably is lacking.
That's
Feedback's really important.
amazing. And that's a great way to look at feedback. So I hope a lot of our viewers and listeners will take this input from you, that feedback is always positive, criticism can always be positive. So Heather, I have time
Yes.
for 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
My next question is, how do you envision the future of visual art and design, especially with so many advancements taking place in all kinds of technology?
That's a really big question. I think a lot of people are kind of scared right now. I know a lot of visual artists in particular are very nervous about what's happening with AI and the way Gen AI scrapes information off the internet. There's a little bit of a backlash in the way that Gen AI learns. So I think that my hope is that the future will be a little bit more of a cooperation with artists and the tech giants. I would like to see less conflict going on. There's a new site called Kara that a bunch of artists just developed so that they had their own platform for people who weren't involved with AI. My feeling is that AI is going to be such a prevalent and such an intense thing in the future. It would be good for artists to learn it and to be able to work with it. And if they would like to unionize or create their own groups, it's better to understand the technology first. I'm one of those people, I think if you're going to get involved, you need to really understand everything about what you're getting involved in. I think the future will be definitely more AI in more areas, not just generative AI. I think there will be, I hope there will be sort of a golden era for artists where we're going to come up with new forms and new ways of working. I think it would be a lot less production. It's going to be more about thinking and concept development, because a lot of the things that we do technically right now are already being automated. So what happens when all the grunt work goes away and all the production work goes away and everything becomes very easy? Then it's about the way you think. So I'm very curious about
Great
that.
response. And my last question, what advice would you give to aspiring young visual artists and designers who are just starting off in their careers?
That's another big question. I think my advice to you right now, because the visual arts world is so turbulent and changing so fast right now, is to really develop ways of thinking, to really develop your empathy. We're going through so much change in the world. The human component as robotics and AI come in is going to be more and more important, because our brains are hardwired to crave touch and connection. So that is going to be a really valuable commodity going forward. The tech is going to change so fast over the next 2 years, 3 years. I don't think learning tech will be as valuable, but you need to understand the basics of how it works as it's finding its footing. And the last part I would tell them is learn to be more resilient and learn to take better feedback, like we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely.
Those are going to be the cornerstones of your career.
Well said. Heather, on that note, thank you so much for talking to me about your own amazing journey. Thank you for talking to me about all the amazing recognitions you've had in the world of graphic design and in media. I think I learned many new things from you today, on the use of generative AI, on what is happening in visual art and design. Thank you also for talking to me about supernova. I had no idea about supernova, but I will go and read up a little more about this. But thank you so much for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.